Hi, I'm John Solo. Welcome to John Solo's Beard Brigade. We're going to be doing a story time episode here, and I'm I'm rarely speechless. Okay, normally it's not a problem. I can talk till the cows come home. And where the hell did that even come from? Did somebody stand out in the front yard and just start yapping away, and then like suddenly the cows finally got there, and they're like, "Well, fuck, that worked." But anyways, normally I don't find myself not knowing what to say. This is a book we're working on today. Born Daddy, it's Command and Care Book 2 by Morticia Knight. Morticia Knight is a newer client to us. She came on the show, I don't know, was it last year? On Talk to the Beard, I met her for the first time.
Paying us.
And she was wonderful. I loved her to death. She was fantastic. And eventually she picked me up for a series. This is the second one of the series. And this is just like completely out of left field, different from the previous one of the series. Now, these are kind of standalone-ish. They're all connected by kind of a daddy theme, but I don't even know if other characters from the first book show up in this. I don't think they do. It's very standalone. And this is just a completely different animal than what we normally work on. It's intense, and it's deep, and the character development is just dripping out of their eyes. It's fucking wonderful. It's just take my word on this. This is different from what we normally do. And check out the story time. I'm going to read you the summary here, and I think you'll get an idea of where I'm going with this and why I'm saying these things. They both loved an evil man, and a wrenching journey to redemption leaning on each other will change their lives forever. Grief-stricken Tate Myers can't believe his daddy and master is gone. Reeling from the discovery of his dead lover's secret life as a serial killer, he seeks answers from the one person who could heal his heart. But and by the way, I'm going to stop here, and maybe you missed that. Reeling from the discovery of his dead lover's secret life as a serial killer, he seeks answers from the one person who could help heal his heart. But when coffee shop chats with his daddy's best friend turns into an intense attraction, Tate wonders if he's found the man to complete his recovery. Former undercover cop Rogan Steele, that's a porn name, by the way, is completely blindsided when he learns his longtime buddy was a sadistic murderer. And, with his own judgment now in question, he strongly empathizes with the grieving young man left traumatized and helpless. However, as their meetings fan the growing flames between them, Rogan is terrified he can't fill the unfamiliar dominant role that Tate so desperately needs. As their passion overpowers their hesitation, Tate aches to fully succumb to the older man's control. If only Rogan doesn't run away from what he was born to be, then they might stand a chance at forever. Will the shell-shocked pair surrender to their destiny and accept love's risk, or will the scars from their shared tragedy destroy their future as daddy and boy? Born Daddy is the second book in the steamy Command and Care MM Romance Daddy Boy series, but can be read as a standalone. Each installment features a different couple, and the series is connected through a common theme only. For possible triggers, please check the Look Inside feature. If you like wounded heroes, dark themes, and triumphs over tragedy, then you'll adore Morticia Knight's decadent descent into deep desire. This thing is a trip so far, and it's incredibly well written. I'm blown away impressed. So check this out. This is going to be chapter 2, and you kind of get the gist of what's going on here. They're obviously the two main characters. Cam was the killer, the guy, and now he's dead. And these two guys, the ex-cop and the killer's estranged boy, they were just at the funeral, and they've decided to go out for coffee together. They don't know each other very well. And this is chapter 2. Enjoy. I hope you guys like this as much as I do. Chapter 2. Sure. Tate couldn't believe he had had the nerve to show up at Cam's service, let alone to approach Rogan. Now, another miracle had occurred, and Rogan had agreed to speak with him. He hadn't snarled at Tate and told him what a sicko he was, or that he had probably known all along what was happening and done nothing to stop the gruesome killings. The police certainly had. Rogan gave him a warm smile. That alone eased a portion of the agony he had barely survived in the past couple of months. "All right. Good." Rogan glanced around the area. "Are any of these cars yours?" Tate grunted. "No. I took the bus." Rogan's brow creased. From Northampton? That must have been a hell of a journey. No. I've been hiding out in Roxbury. That must have been a hell of a journey. No. I've been hiding out in Roxbury. I'd leave Massachusetts altogether, but the cops told me I couldn't. Rogan pressed his lips together. You're aware I'm a cop, right? Cam said you were a teacher, though, right? Shit, maybe this whole idea was as bad as he had originally thought it was. Rogan nodded. Yes, that's true. I'm no longer in the field, and I was never a detective or in homicide. He sighed. However, I know plenty of guys in the precinct who are handling this. I'm not a priest. Anything you confess to me, I have to pass along. There's nothing for you to tell. Tate swallowed down the anger that always arose whenever someone either directly or indirectly accused him of participating in the murders. I didn't take part. I didn't know. Not a damn thing, I swear. He scraped his teeth along his bottom lip. Actually, that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about. Rogan furrowed his brow. How so? I need to know if I was the only one who knew him well and was also in the dark. Rogan furrowed his brow. How so? I need to know if I was the only one who knew him well and who was also in the dark the whole time about what he was doing. His mom hates me, and the other guys who used to come to the house. Tate shrugged. Oh, no. I don't know of anyone else I can talk to about him. Yeah. Okay. Rogan sighed. As long as you keep in mind what I told you. I will. Relief washed over Tate, surprising him in its intensity. He'd been so damn alone throughout this nightmare. You feel comfortable enough to ride with me in my truck? Tate gave Rogan a tentative smile. That would be great. Thanks. Rogan smiled back. Good. Then let's go. After a brief discussion about which coffee shop they should go to, with Tate reassuring Rogan it didn't matter and that he should choose, they were on their way. With almost everything, it would be his daddy. Tate screwed his eyes shut. If he didn't stop thinking of Cam that way, he'd go batshit crazy. Regardless, he'd never been the one to make the decisions. The journey was mostly silent, which didn't bother Tate a bit. Talking was going to be the problem. The journey was mostly silent, which didn't bother Tate a bit. Talking was going to be the problem. But he had to know, had to believe. He wasn't the only one who hadn't had a clue. Because surely if Rogan was this adamant about reporting him to the authorities, then he would have reported anything he had suspected about Cam as well. The knowledge of that alone filled him with a strange comfort. Here we are. Rogan pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript diner. Tate had never heard of it, so it probably wasn't a chain restaurant. Rogan had likely chosen a place that wouldn't be too busy. Diner. Tate had never heard of it, so it probably wasn't a chain restaurant. Rogan had likely chosen a place that wouldn't be too busy. At least, Tate imagined that's what he'd done. Once Rogan shut off the engine, he regarded Tate. I've only been here a few times, but there's a section in the back with some booths. Should be more private. If at any time you feel uncomfortable, we can find somewhere else. Thank you. His eyes burned. Rogan's kindness was almost too much to bear. After they made their way inside, Rogan asked the hostess for the section he described to Tate. When she protested that it was closed, he slipped her a $20 bill and made his request again. Already Tate felt as if he was a nuisance and that they hadn't even sat down yet. Closed, he slipped her a $20 bill and made his request again. Already Tate felt as if he was a nuisance and they hadn't even sat down yet. She led them to the... Closed, he slipped her a $20 bill and made his request again. Already Tate felt as if he was a nuisance and they hadn't even sat down yet. She led them to the booth at the farthest end of the restaurant, handed them menus, then took their drink order. Tate glanced at Rogan. The man had come here to speak with him, and he didn't want to waste his one opportunity to maybe get some answers, to receive permission to release the ever-present guilt that plagued him. Thanks again. I don't have anyone else to talk to. Rogan folded his hands on the table and leaned forward with a frown. No one? Not even a counselor or something? Tate gave a small shrug. I saw a guy a few times, but he was creeping me out. I could tell he had already come to a conclusion about me, that I must be as bad as Cam was. So I stopped going. Asshole, Rogan growled. Tate arched his eyebrows. You think so? He fiddled with the paper napkin that was wrapped around the cutlery. I tried seeing things from his side, like you were warning me about, that if I confessed to anything he'd have to tell. Rogan winced. Look, I barely know you, but even so, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. My warning was more of a, disclaimer, if you will. He scratched his chin. I suppose it was more for me than for you. A way to absolve myself of guilt should you tell me something I'd have to share. He crossed his arms and leaned forward again. I'm assuming you knew nothing, the way I knew nothing. Let's operate under that assumption for us both.
The same way I knew nothing.
Have to share. He crossed his arms and leaned forward again. I'm assuming you knew nothing the same way I knew nothing. Let's operate under that assumption for us both. Deal? Tate nodded, relief washing over him. Deal. He understood agreements, deals, promises, behaving. The moment he had given himself over to Cam and became deals, promises, behaving. The moment he'd given himself over to Cam and become his boy, he'd followed the rules and done what he was told. He'd been a good boy. Rogan's eyes crinkled as he smiled. Perfect. Let's put in our order. Then we can begin. A cloud passed over his features as if Rogan had remembered there was nothing to smile about. Tate slid his menu to the edge of the table. I'm not all that hungry. I was just going to get some coffee, if that's all right. Rogan's eyebrows shot up. Sure? He frowned. Why wouldn't it be? Rogan set down his menu. I guess we should also establish some parameters here. Complete transparency with each other, no holding back. Agreed? Agreed. God, but he craved this. Established boundaries gave him the structure he required to properly function. The biggest reason why he'd been so scattered since Cam's death was there'd been no one to tell him it was okay, that they'd take care of everything and he'd be fine. He'd never been so far from fine as he was right now, not even back when he was in foster care. Rogan might not be a daddy, but he was older, an authority figure. Tate had already seen how he'd taken charge at the service and made sure Mrs. LeBlanc was all right. That alone had cemented his decision to approach Rogan. An authority figure? Tate had already seen how he'd taken charge at the service and made sure Mrs. LeBlanc was all right. That alone had cemented his decision to approach Rogan. Rogan glanced up from the menu he'd gone back to studying. First test of transparency. Are you only getting coffee because you don't have the money for anything else? I never had a clear understanding of the nature of your relationship with Cam. Rogan cleared his throat. But I got the impression he handled everything financially for you. He did. In many ways, Tate wondered if the daddy boy aspect of his life with Cam would be more...
In some ways.
financially for you. He did. In some ways, Tate wondered if the daddy boy aspect of his life with Cam would be more difficult for Rogan to grasp than anything else about their relationship. But I've got money. I'm not ordering because my stomach's upset. Tate squirmed on the bench seat. He should probably confess to at least one thing, yet he was too frightened to bring it up. If the cops took the money, then what would he do? One of Cam's rules invaded his thoughts. Not admitting to something you know is wrong. What would he do? I'm gonna do this now. I didn't see it in the notes, but I'm gonna do it.
Do you have a voice for Cam?
No, that's what I'm saying. When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow. It could just be this one instance, but just in case. What would he do? One of Cam's rules invaded his thoughts. Not admitting to something you know is wrong is just as bad as lying to me about it, even if I don't ask. Understand? Yes, Daddy, I understand. Tate's hands shook as he clasped them together in his lap, worried that Rogan might have noticed. I want to see how that played. The money, then what would he do? One of Cam's rules invaded his thoughts. Not admitting to something you know is wrong is just as bad as lying to me about it, even if I don't ask. Understand? Yes, Daddy, I understand. I'm going to do that one more time. It's a timing thing, nothing else. What would he do? One of Cam's rules invaded his thoughts. Not admitting to something you know is wrong is just as bad as lying to me about it, even if I don't ask. Understand? Yes, Daddy, I understand. Tate's hands shook as he clasped them together in his lap, worried that Rogan might have...
And he clasped them.
Understand? Yes, Daddy, I understand. Tate's hands shook, and he clasped them together in his lap, worried that Rogan might have noticed. Have you been eating? Rogan regarded him with a furrowed brow, concern shining from his eyes. I remember you always being thin, but I'm not sure if it was this thin. I'm not sure. Maybe? I guess my clothes have seemed a bit looser. I try to eat, but it makes me nauseous. I can't stop my thoughts. Bile rose from his stomach, and he fought to keep from gagging. They showed me the pictures. Rogan's jaw dropped. Wait, they? You mean the detectives made you look at the... They? Rogan's jaw dropped. Wait, they? You mean the detectives made you look at them? Are you guys ready to order? Tate started at the server's voice, his heart thundering. He swallowed hard and did the deep breathing exercises the counselor had shown him during their first visit. Rogan scrubbed his face with one hand, then regarded the server with a tight smile. She stood with her pencil poised over her pack, gazing at Rogan with a dispassionate stare. "Do you have any chicken noodle soup? Something along those lines?" "Yeah. We also have cream of broccoli." "No, thanks. We'll chick to the stick and noodle." "Yeah. Along those lines?" "Yeah. We also have cream of broccoli." "No, thanks. We'll stick to the chicken noodle. 2 cups of that with crackers, dry toast, and if you don't have the crackers and... one more time." "Along those lines?" "Yeah. We also have cream of broccoli." "No, thanks. We'll stick to the chicken noodle. 2 cups of that with crackers, dry toast if you don't have the crackers, and the 2 cups of coffee." She arched her eyebrows. "That's it?" Rogan took Tate's menu and added it to his own before handing them to her. "For now." After she left, Rogan regarded him again. Jesus. With a sigh, he rested his arms on the table. "I want to say I'm shocked, but I'm not. That's normal procedure when they're trying to shock a suspect into admitting something." Rogan locked eyes with him. "But I'm sorry it happened to you. They're gruesome, disturbing. I'm a seasoned officer, and they upset me for days afterward. They'll haunt me for the rest of my life. So I can't begin to imagine how awful that was for you." "Why did they show them to you?" Rogan winced. "I asked to see them." Tate's gut tightened. "What? Why? Why would you want to look at something that horrible?" "I needed to know." Rogan rubbed his forehead. "It's hard to explain. I had this compulsion, this bizarre idea that the murders couldn't possibly be as horrific as they'd been characterized by the media." He shook his head. "Any murder is horrific, of course, but this was done by someone I've been close to for fucking years. Decades, even. Cam couldn't possibly be the monster he'd been portrayed as, could he? Jesus fucking Christ. There are already 2 books being written. One of the authors has even been hounding me for interviews." Tate gasped. Would those authors find out where he was? If only the authorities would let him leave the state. If only he could go so far away no one would ever know where he was. Rogan's eyes shone. "I thought I could handle it, Tate. I really did. But instead of proving to me he wasn't as sick as everyone said he was, I saw that no words would ever be strong enough to describe the evil that had been my friend. No words." He returned his gaze to Tate. "No words." He returned his gaze to Tate. "I'm so sorry, Tate. I wish I could take that moment back for you, erase those memories so you wouldn't have to suffer the emotional scars of seeing what he was capable of." They sat in silence as Tate digested what Rogan had shared. What a fucked up mess. How would either of them get beyond the trauma Cam had inflicted? Even reminding himself that he was the so-called lucky one didn't help. He hadn't been tortured, mutilated, terrorized. He'd been spared whatever sick compulsion drove Cam. He wasn't a family member He'd been spared whatever sick compulsion drove Cam. He wasn't a family member or friend of one of the victims. What right did he have to be so upset? The server arrived with their coffee first, then the soup on the heels of that. Once they'd left again, Tate stared at the steam lazily rising from
Once she'd left again.
The server arrived with their coffee first, then the soup on the heels of that. Once she'd left again, Tate stared at the steam lazily rising from the ceramic cup set on a saucer, 2 packages of soda crackers tucked on the side. The scent of the soup had a dual effect on his system. It both enticed and repelled him. He was hungry. Hadn't been eating much overall, but His anxiety would always get to him after only a few bites and make it impossible to continue. Rogan had shown would always get to him after only a few bites and make it impossible to continue. Rogan had chosen wisely, though. Perhaps he could make it through the broth and noodles. Just try, Tate. If you can't finish the whole thing, it's not healthy to go without eating.
Still,
I got it.
even
He
if you
would
can't.
always get to He would always get to him after only a few bites and make it impossible to continue. Rogan had chosen wisely, though. Perhaps he could make it through the broth and noodles. Just try, Tate. Even if you can't finish the whole thing, it's not healthy to go without eating. That can affect your mood in addition to your physical health. Tate inclined his head as he regarded the small meal. He hadn't thought of that, but Rogan was probably right. They both took a few mouthfuls of their food, Tate following Rogan's lead when he opened the first package of crackers. Mimicking Rogan's actions gave Tate an odd sense of calm, helped him to refocus on performing one small task at a time. This was the only thing happening: eating, staving off hunger, nothing else. Rogan paused his soup consumption. So, you said you're staying in Roxbury? Is that where your family is? Tate took a nibble of a cracker before setting it down. I don't have any family. That's what Cam was supposed to be. I mean, he was before. He sucked in a deep breath. Before. Tate decided to stick to the coffee. At least he had made it through most of the soup. Rogan let out a sigh. Sorry. I thought I'd found a less upsetting topic. Tate let out a chuckle with no humor. Not your fault. My life has been a mess for a long time. The latest development is just the cherry on top. Hey, listen. Rogan pushed his soup away, then brought his coffee mug closer. We can talk about whatever the hell you want. It's cool. If puppies and kittens are the subject of the hour, so be it. Rogan pushed his soup away, then brought his coffee mug closer. We can talk about whatever the hell you want. It's cool. If puppies and kittens are the subject of the hour, so be it. My personal favorite are German Shepherds, although I don't have a dog right now. I wasn't able to have pets when I was undercover. Wouldn't have been fair to the animal. Tate picked up the half-eaten cracker. Yeah, I'd like to hear about that. German Shepherds? Tate laughed. An honest-to-God laugh. It felt weird. No, I meant your undercover work. Was it dangerous? Rogan gave him a lopsided grin. Well, very. It hadn't been my initial dream career, but damn, once I was approached early in my career, the idea grabbed me and took hold. I recognized that my original goal of becoming a detective would likely never happen, but this seemed more exciting. He grunted. That barely scratches the surface of what it was like. But it was fulfilling. For a number of years. I have no regrets. What kind of cases did you do? Any famous ones? Tate added more sugar to his coffee. They weren't discussing what he'd come there to discuss, but maybe they shouldn't. Maybe all he needed was to hear Rogan say he hadn't suspected Cam either. They could probably leave it like that. Then Tate could move on to the next thing. Whatever that thing might be, he had no clue. Well, most weren't. Well, the most famous one would have to be the Diaz gang bust. I was deep undercover for 3 years on that one. He chuckled. That's what brought that phase of my life to a conclusion and made me switch to teaching, though. Not only had I become too well known within the drug and money laundering circles, but I'd had enough of that life. Tate's eyes widened. He'd heard about that case, had read the stories of how ruthless that gang had been. Weren't you scared? He shuddered. I'd be so terrified they'd know I was full of shit within 5 minutes of meeting me. His eyes snapped up. I'm not saying you're full of shit, or... What I mean is, he and Rogan would probably never see each other again after their unusual get-together, but that didn't mean he needed to insult the guy. That's okay, Tate. Believe me, I worried they'd think I was full of shit, too. I didn't deliver that as well as I could. Was full of shit within 5 minutes of meeting me. His eyes snapped up. I'm not saying you're full of shit, or... What I mean is... He and Rogan would probably never see each other again after their unusual get-together, but that didn't mean he needed to insult the guy. That's okay, Tate. Believe me, I worried they'd think I was full of shit, too. They shared an easy laugh. After hearing more details of the undercover operation and how Rogan and his team had brought down the gang, ending in a deadly shootout, an hour or two more... Rogan and his team had brought down the gang, ending in a deadly shootout. An hour and 2 more cups of coffee each had gone... Rogan and his team had brought down the gang, ending in a deadly shootout. An hour and 2 more cups of coffee each had gone by. The server had begun giving them the side eye as the early dinner crowd started filtering out. An hour and 2 more cups of coffee each had gone by. The server had begun giving them the side eye as the early dinner crowd started filtering in. Rogan glanced her way, then stretched his arms above his head. I think we're getting the silent bums rush. Tate chewed his lip. He'd never heard that expression until he'd gotten with Cam. Was that something Cam and his buddies had started saying in high school? One of those meaningless shared sayings that originates with close friends and becomes a part of a person's imprint as they carry on through life? A sudden compulsion to know about those early years gripped him. Maybe that's where the answer lay as to how Cam had become such a monster. Yeah, I guess so. Tate licked his lips. Hanging out and talking with Rogan had been the most normal thing he had done since Cam had been gunned down at his final crime scene. The thought of going back to his numb existence after they said goodbye terrified him. So... Tate squirmed in his seat. If you ever are, wanting to grab coffee again sometime, I'd be up for it. Rogan regarded him with intent. His brow barely creased, his eyes only somewhat narrowed, but the expression was telling enough that Tate knew Rogan was running the pros and cons of getting together again through his mind. At last, he gave a barely perceptible nod. I'd like that. I think it would be good for us both. Maybe once a week. I'm always available on Sundays. Tate had been hoping for more interaction than that, but he'd take what he could get. Sure. Sundays. Rogan inclined his head. Although I finish at the academy early on Wednesdays. Maybe for this week at least we could meet twice? Tate let out a long exhale. He wouldn't have to be alone for a whole week. A few days would be easy. He could totally do that. As long as it's no trouble. Rogan offered him a warm smile. Not at all. Let's get out of here, okay? Tate smiled back. Sure. After Rogan had paid the bill, despite Tate's protests, they made their way to Rogan's truck. As they strolled through the parking, Rogan had paid the bill, despite Tate's protests, they made their way to Rogan's truck. As they strolled through the parking lot, the awkwardness of earlier returned. Tate figured he should make his goodbyes now, but wanted to make sure he had the plans for Wednesday nailed down first. That had always been one of his biggest struggles, worrying about every little thing. He'd obsess about them.
Worrying over every little thing.
Wednesday nailed down first. That had always been one of his biggest struggles, worrying over every little thing. He'd obsess about the next meeting if Rogan didn't spell it all out. He probably won't understand. Tate struggled with what to say, running casual questions through his head with no success. Rogan beat him to it. Let's exchange numbers, just in case Rogan paused, shifting on his feet. Listen, I want you to look me in the eye while I say this. Tate complied, his heart thudding, his mind racing as he wondered what Rogan might be about to tell him. Call me whenever you need to, Tate. Even if you just want to talk, or something happens, like a reporter or someone messes with you. You got it? Promise me. Tate swallowed hard. I promise. Rogan gave him a sharp nod. Good. Let's get a move on and we can figure out where we want to meet next while I drive you home. Oh, that's okay. I was just going to take the bus again. Rogan pressed his lips in a thin line. That doesn't work for me. Huh? Rogan pressed his lips in a thin line. That doesn't work for me. Huh? I don't like the idea of someone recognizing you and either bullying or even hurting you. Rogan gave him a sheepish smile. Sorry. Not trying to be bossy, but indulge me. Hazards of my job, I suppose. I'm always considering the worst-case scenario, then working out how to avoid it. That's okay. I don't mind. If only Rogan knew how little he minded. Great. Rogan's smile widened. Shall we? He clicked the fob to unlock the truck, and Tate made his way to the passenger side. As he climbed into the large vehicle, Tate realized that a portion of the unrelenting tension that had been keeping him prisoner had eased a bit. Taking a chance on approaching Rogan had been the right thing to do. Maybe he'd survived the horror of having been Cam's boy after all.